invite you also to have us have another snack. We're not super formal. And Eva, now you're no longer at Human Development Report Office?
I retired 6 weeks ago.
So why are you here instead of on vacation?
No, but that, I still can take on my hat from the office. And maybe, I mean, it's interesting when you've had 10 years on the index. How has the actual index evolved over those 10 years? I mean, how have you, in a way, reacted also to discussion and criticism and also learning and availability and data during that process? How was it different?
So we've actually, I mean, it has evolved, I think. When we started, we had probably 140-something countries included. We are now at 163. I will once again emphasize that that includes some territories. We include Taiwan in the index as Taiwan. I'm forced to say some territories to make that very clear. We included Palestine as well last year, Kosovo, and as there's more data, Mauritius. Those are some of the countries I can remember off the top of my head we've included in the last few years. So the number of countries has increased. The data, I think, has gotten stronger, and there are a couple reasons for that. One is when the index started, and we contracted the Economist Intelligence Unit to collect the data and to collate it. They really did the majority of the index those first few years. As the Institute has built up around the index, because the index actually came first, we have developed our own capacity and our own internal research team. So there's a lot more peer review happening against the index, but we've also taken over ourselves a number of indicator construction. We've also, I think, enhanced the indicators as a result. So we have a lot more internal discussion, not just amongst our staff, but with the panel and with the economist around some of the scores. We also have tried to refine certain indicators so that they are slightly more nuanced. We took indicators looking at external conflicts and internal conflicts, and we actually divided them up so that we're including duration, length, and role for both, so that there's a little bit more nuance. I think one thing that we've done quite well over the years of the index is that we're very transparent about what is included. So in the back of the report, we have the methodology section, which can be technical and boring, but there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into balancing out this data so that you don't have gaps in data or discrepancies in data, which will undoubtedly be there, have such a great impact on the actual index itself. So each indicator is described with the source, with its weighting. They're also banded, which means they're in groupings that allow to average out some extremities. And for the qualitative indicators, we actually include the questions that are being asked and the scales that are being used to score those indicators. So I think that transparency is actually really important, and there's some indices out there that are not that transparent about how they're constructed, and I think that's actually been a major plus because we can always fall back on explaining that and understanding, what percentage of the index does this indicator actually make up. So we do a lot of internal tests seeing how it would impact the index. Anytime we include a new indicator, we include a new country, we recalculate the index backward. So what you see in the reports or online, if there's, for instance, the United States was 102 one year, but now when you go online for that year it's 103, it's because we've recalculated the index backwards. I think in terms of communications and what we've seen, interestingly, the world has actually changed a lot since we started doing this. And I kind of joke around that I've been working with IEP for almost 7 years now, and the world has gotten much less peaceful. So it's, as we expand, the world gets less peaceful, which is really not a great testament to our work. But I think what's the most important thing that we have worked on, and that will continue to be the most important thing, and that's actually overtaken the Global Peace Index itself, is the positive peace framework. And we wouldn't be, even though we consider it a separate piece of research, we would not have been able to get there without the Global Peace Index. And what the Global Peace Index trends are showing over the longer term period is that there is actually more of a need for investments in positive peace, no matter which sector of society you may be working in. So the fact that the world is becoming less peaceful, that the conflicts that are driving that, or the violence that's driving that, is around many types of internal factors. All of that shows that there should be more of an investment in positive peace. And what we've seen really is that, I think, yes, there's a research agenda behind positive peace and testing it and looking at risk models and tools, but much more importantly, it's actually a framework for discussion, and it's a framework for action in a way, because we are increasingly talking about resilience, we're talking about prevention efforts, we're talking about sustaining peace and the sustaining peace agenda at the United Nations that calls for much more preventive efforts and coordinated efforts. We're talking about sustainable development and the sustainable development goals. And there's so many conversations with so much overlap and very good intentions, but because this framework is actually much more holistic, and we know that all of these components work together as a system, it does provide a way to organize conversation, to organize measurement, and that's where I think there's real potential. And so to me, that's actually how the index has evolved, where the Global Peace Index itself is an excellent tool for media attention, for academics, for researchers, but in reality, in terms of impact, the positive peace work is where it's at.
So earlier you said when you knew the index, you predicted that, I believe you said Syria and Yemen would deteriorate into war and chaos. So do you look at your data and do you proactively go to countries and say, you're about to go to absolute anarchy, here's what you need to do? So do you take, or do you just basically say, this data, you look at it and predict what you want?
No, and I think I want to be very sort of careful. It's a lot easier when we're looking backwards in the data to say, oh, if we had done these measurements, we would have seen vulnerabilities. And then to say, we could have predicted what's gone on in Syria. So I just want to be kind of careful there. What it shows are deficits. What it can show are deficits in positive peace. Which countries are more likely to have increases in violence. And that doesn't mean Syria or Yemen levels of increases in violence, because there's a lot of factors that have gone in to those conflicts that are not even reflected there. We are looking at different risk analysis. We are not using this as in any way as an early warning mechanism. What we're trying to do actually, and the way that the positive peace work is framed, is much more about more proactive, earlier investments despite your level of peace. And so interestingly, when we look at the US and we look at the decline in the US, we've also seen that over a 10-year period, the United States has been has had the fourth largest decline in positive peace as well. And so we've seen rising corruption, less free flow of information, less acceptance of the rights of others. So these two things, they work hand in hand. And so there's a message there for the United States. It's not about IEP going, knocking on every government's door. Now, we try to make the data useful for people within countries to be more proactive about. And part of that also is looking at these global trends, looking at these regional trends, looking at these country trends. But we don't have necessarily the answer for everybody on what to do.
But do you have an idea how can you compete with the industry of the weapon industry? That's the biggest in the planet, number one. Last year was like $13 trillion. 70% came to this country as profit. So if you finish the war, the weapon industry, the war, this country is going to go bankrupt. So how can you, I think the biggest problem in the war is the weapon industry. They want to continue to make money. How can you peace compete with the war? There is no money for refugees, no money for peace. We don't have it.
But you can't have one without the other three levels of power that's the military. It is, because if we only had peace, none of us would be here. If we only had weapons, none of us would
But
be
you see,
here.
my father was a refugee in 1925 from Syria. And I'm back trying to rescue our land in Syria in a peace and culture project. And I think it's like you said, there's nothing, it's growing. It's mass production today. Today is mass production. So I think we should look and bring to this table the weapon industry.
No, I agree with you, and it's a very good point. And I mean, the index includes heavy weapons exports, weapons imports. You know, a lot of the
This is just
noise.
5-6 families in the United States. This is just 5-6 families.
But then, I mean, I would say that it's better to start having more acknowledgement of these issues and political pressure around them, and a coordination between other corporations and private sector who are not necessarily benefiting from the arms industry to provide more political pushback. Because then the option would be then do nothing because it's all powerful.
No, we
So-
should work with the weapon industry and suggest them to change their business. For the tourism industry, help the planet, clean up the planet, use all their weapons, planes, soldiers. Can you imagine if you can travel all over the world and help people, being a volunteer or make as a soldier helping? You know, we give, because I have a friend in Washington, and I met him, I worked 15 years at the United Nations. And he's in Washington, and one day he said, Teresa, the only business that can compete with the weapon industry is the tourism industry. And I think that he's right. Nothing makes more money as tourism and everybody's happy. So, you know, I think it doesn't cost nothing for us, like you said, talk. Talk and suggest. Talk and suggest. I don't know.
But you turn them talking suggestions into actions.
Yes.
Because me personally, I work with a lot of grassroots organizations, and I jump around. I don't have a home, and like this is important for me because this is something I can go back and tell them. Well, we can use this, or we can do that. Like use examples, and then like to form an action in order to stop something. Like if I want to lobby against the NRA, I would use this data and be like X, Y, Z, and then we move forward. So it's a good tool to use.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that's not a good
I mean,
tool.
I think, you know, but I do think it's interesting because you have a significant private sector that's interested in having some sort of corporate responsibility. Maybe it's just all marketing, but UN Global Compact has, did you say 9,500 members worldwide? So bringing them together, you know, working, I would say that anti-corruption initiatives also have a role with the weapons industry. So placing more emphasis and trying to figure out more ways to reduce corruption can have an impact there. And putting political pressure within countries, this country included, is important. I mean, we do have in the United States where weapons, arms dealers are particularly active and who are making a huge lobbying effort that's difficult to counteract, but we do have elected officials who respond to public pressure, and we need to continue to put that public pressure on them. And I think that information here is particularly important because, and I'm sorry to keep using the US example, but from a policy perspective, it's come up a lot. Most Americans have no idea how the federal budget is spent at all. And given how much of it we spend on our military, on our defense operations, you know, it would behoove us to have a better idea. If you ask Americans, many of whom are constantly arguing for cutting foreign aid and thinking that we spend so much money in the US on foreign aid at the expense of their own livelihoods, what they think the percentage of the federal budget that goes to foreign aid is, the average response is 25%. In reality, it's closer to 0.1%. If you ask them what you think would be a level, an acceptable level of foreign aid, the majority of Americans answer 10%. So there's not, it's not that they think there should be zero, it's that there's also a lack of information or understanding or proactive campaigns about what we're actually spending and where. And I think there's so many resources out there that are already flowing that trying to identify what we're spending on and where is important, because then we can start to even think about just shifting some of those, not only looking to create new ones. And you're very right, the tourism sector is and hospitality is the obvious ally for the peace industry.
We have 65 million refugees.
And I mean, there are organizations for tourism and peace, but it's not an easy. I don't want to speak for
Not a
you
quick
at Global
answer.
Compact,
But you know,
but
during
my
all of our
experience
6 million refugees, all how they united, the Jews are, they connected, they formed their country. Now we have 65 million refugees, and I don't see any movement. No money for refugees, no media for refugees, nothing. I'm sorry.
I don't disagree with you.
You being upset is a good thing, but turn that into some kind of action.
I'm doing action. I have a peace culture project for the Golan Heights. I want to build villages for refugees in Golan, in the other side of Syria. We have 7 million refugees around Israel. And they cannot ignore that. In 10 years, they're going to be what? Terrorists? You took my land, we live in refugee camp. We have to work with the refugees, otherwise we're going to create more hate. I think the worst weapon we can have is hate. They explode their body because they don't have a weapon living with them, that's what happened. And they call them terrorists.
I agree with you. I think that there needs to be
Address.
at not just the political level addressing this, but also in terms of campaigns and understanding what you can do to impact the situation. It's not clear, it's very overwhelming to people, and the complexity of these issues tends to make people think either they just donate money or they turn away from it.
We want to a campaign, give me 5 for peace. Can you imagine billions of people giving $5 for peace? Campaign, give me 5 for peace. Stop the war.
But I mean, at UN Global Compact, you guys are doing work in this area.
I'll just maybe add
about
to
more than money, because that's been my difficulty when I'm going into things. Like if I'm explaining, I'm giving somebody a spiel or whatever, and then at the end of that spiel, it's about me getting money from you.
No, it's not
lost,
giving money,
you know?
it's giving money for people, it's giving money for peace, to arrange things.
At the end of the, like I said, you have to have something. There has to be more answers than just money, because that's the difficulty I'm having today when I'm getting involved in things. I have a discomfort in only just asking for donations. I would like your ideas. I would like for you to grow, help this campaign grow, this, that, or whatever, because like I said, money,
We don't move
it's no
without money.
accountability. There's no
We don't make a
accountability.
phone call without money. We don't move without money. We have to accept money. Why the weapon industry is so profitable? Money.
Actually,
Money.
you have some comments to make
Yeah, just-
about people.
Not really, well, I don't know. Kind of personal, quasi-global compact reactions, I guess. Just 2 things. You probably know this really well, and it's obviously at the policy level, but there is this ongoing process on the global compact, like our name, on migration and refugees. That's an intergovernmental process that's ongoing, and there will be an intergovernmental conference next year where they hope to come up with some sort of government-led solution on migration and refugee issues. So that's an ongoing process. So if you representing any of your organizations can become accredited and become a part of that, you're probably encouraged to do that with DPI. So just wanted to flag that. I guess more on the UN Global Compact on our side, what we've been doing, obviously mobilizing business to do good, but specifically on this topic of refugees and conflict-related issues, we're working right now literally to launch in September what we're calling an action platform to mobilize the private sector in support of refugees and people that have been displaced by conflict. And just on what the experience so far and trying to get this even off the ground, there's two key things. One is the humanitarian world in and of itself hasn't really worked too much with the private sector. So tapping into civil society organizations, the UN system proper, and figuring out what can companies do besides just giving money, because that's an obvious easy win, easy out, and companies have done that and continue to do it. We want to figure out a way to enable companies to do a little bit more. Given that a lot of these issues are very political also, it's been quite a bit of a challenge. So I love to use the example of Pearson every single time I talk about this stuff, but Pearson, for instance, launched a project with Save the Children where they're delivering education for children in emergencies from refugee camps in Jordan. That's a great example of how a company can hopefully use their core business, not just give money, and co-create a solution with the humanitarian actor. So that's the type of stuff we at the Global Compact are trying to promote. Very small, very tiny, and we're doing it across a number of different issues. But there's been, to say the least, I think especially in the conflict-affected areas, and now dealing with conflict-affected people, it's been a bit challenging to even get off going. Another thing, I guess, in that light is because there's an upcoming reform of the UN peace building, and you probably all know this better than I do, and also the funding challenges that the UN is having. A lot of UN entities are actually, they've been working with the private sector, but there's a need to get more money into peace building issues, into conflict prevention. And I think this is a very personal opinion, but there's obviously a need to mobilize the private sector in financing for development, and we are promoting that as well. We have a whole team that does that. But I think there's starting to be a little bit of a shift from the UN and other entities in looking at the private sector solely for money. And I think companies don't just want to give money, they want to also become part of the solution. So there's a little bit of a
doesn't
divide.
have a part of a law that guarantees for the weapon industry when they go to the war to protect the refugees? So they said that,
And just to say one last thing on that, the Global Compact, although we have 9,500 companies, it's not a lot in the grand scheme of things, and we don't allow any company to enter the Global Compact that is involved in the production of weapons.
They're the one who make more money.
Right.
They should
but
help
just
me.
because we're a UN entity. So just another disclaimer. So that's something I can't necessarily comment on, but there might be other lobbying organizations that do that, especially at the national level. So just a few comments, thoughts.
Yeah, I would like to add an academic perspective, and especially an economics perspective, since you keep talking and stressing the importance of money. And that is true, but I think especially what IEP is doing is enormously important to get academic thought around these issues also changed. Because in economics there's sort of this widespread idea that, war is good for economics because a lot of businesses, especially arms businesses, make profits with that. While IEP is, with this report and the other work, is establishing a case for businesses to support peace and to see peace as something that can be profitable and more profitable than sustaining war. So I think this is, from an academic perspective, extremely valuable, and that is where all the CEOs and whatever people who get into these industries, they all earn their degrees potentially at these business schools around here. And guess who teaches there? So it's important to shift these paradigms. So I think it's not
important.
useless.
It's important for us to be going on.
It's a bit more long term, but it's definitely important work.
We realize at the end, that's just what you see is growing and became mass production. That's it, mass production of killing. And it's difficult to compete with that.
I also want to add, sorry, I'll pass it to you in a sec. I also want to add from the IEP perspective, we are also moving into working with civil society through the Positive Peace workshops that we're doing. So that's an initiative that started a couple of years ago or so. And so far we've done probably around 5. The latest one was in Mexico, in Puebla, when we were able to get together 300 youth and talk about it, peace and positive peace. So we explained them all the framework, and these individuals came from our partner organization, Rotary International. So all these youth between 18 and 30 are already involved in peace building projects at a different level. So they came to learn about the positive peace, the pillars of peace. So they came back to their projects and to their organizations with this new framework and thinking about peace is not only this like abstract concept, it's something I can
Tangible.
It's tangible, and I can relate to the pillars, and I can incorporate them in my daily work. So I think it is important also for all of us to think that we're tackling different fronts. It's not only the research, but and we are promoting the positive peace framework for other organizations to take these trainings models to go and pass it into different countries, and hopefully going to be doing it in other parts of the world. So I think that's also important for you guys to know. So.
Okay, hi. In regards to the implementation of the Sustaining Peace Agenda, does the Peace Building Commission incorporate your work? Specifically, I'm thinking the positive peace pillars and the framework into their strategy and framework in order to implement the agenda and to achieve the SDGs? If so, to what extent? And if not, how come?
The Peace Building Commission does not the Peace Building Commission has its own internal, politically influenced frameworks. They also are identifying countries that target countries to invest peace building funds into. It's slightly different. One is that the positive peace framework is trying to actually take the strengths and attributes of a country, not looking from what are the risk factors and the fragility, but where are actually the capacities. So the derivation of those factors is from a different angle. It's what can we learn from the most peaceful countries. Where we are working to try to influence that body within the United Nations is in terms of aggregating all the peace building expenditures. So that is much more focused on financing for peace building and helping to make the case for greater financing for peace building. Because what a challenge for peace building is, one is there's barely any agreed upon definition of what it is. So the UN has one definition. The Alliance for Peace Building in Washington has a different definition. It is a complex topic, and there isn't one universal international definition. So we worked with the Peace Building Support Office to develop a definition for the purposes of counting up all of the peace building expenditures. And that's really the first time that that's been done. And so just this very mundane task of counting it all up actually is important. And so that's sort of phase one. Phase two is that we are working with PBSO again to take that, and they actually held a small competition for research methodologies around assessing peace building needs. So how much money is needed actually for certain countries. And that's where there's a coalition of researchers working right now. Is okay, so first we understand what's being spent, and that's not exhaustive. That's domestic expenditures that fit within this definition, and that's looking through foreign aid databases held by the OECD. So it does not include any philanthropic funding, which when we look at examples like the Gates Foundation can be quite significant. And so the next step is really how do we use that to assess needs? And the umbrella to all that is advocacy and campaigning within the UN system for further financing to peace building. I don't know off the top of my head the numbers, but I don't think that PBSO has the largest budget, and particularly compared to the challenges that are being faced now. So the issue now is that so many more of these factors are influencing what was traditionally around peace building. Peace building was much more in terms of at the resolution of a conflict after a certain agreement, how are we building up government functions, safety and security functions, disarmament. Now, just like with peacekeeping, everybody has to think a lot more about active conflict situations, internal actors, non-state actors, and how peace building operates, let's say, within a country that has high levels of terrorism.
Thank you.
Just like the Business for Peace, I have a project on Business for SDG, and another project, the name is Artwise. Basically, we work with other SDG applications to support them. Like Business for SDG, we reach out 900 companies for trying to understand more about SDG, and also like to participate in activities like we are doing. So I'm asking like opportunities within this.
Let's exchange information. That's what we do.
Yeah. I'd like to actually agree totally with you. Like Teresa mentioned of peace on Golan Heights. So I'm working with a private company trying to raise $10 million to build a peace center on her land. But the only way I could get it interested, because the company don't just want to hand it open an open check. They want to get involved and ideally profit from it as well. So I dangle a carrot that she's filing a $21 billion lawsuit in Israel to reclaim her land. So probably interested if she gives us $10 million for a great cause to build a peace museum, bring peace on the Golan Heights. But we win this lawsuit against Israel, there's going to be a real estate, great agricultural land, they even discover oil in the Golan Heights, so that makes their eyes pop up. So if you want to talk to the private sector, you're absolutely right, you've got to get them involved. You can't just go there and say, give me money and we'll do everything. They're not going to do that. You've got to get them involved in it, and ideally, if they can profit from it, just like the arms industry, then they're more likely to write that check for you. So absolutely, and that's
They
that's the only way to go.
asked me where I found the $21 billion. This is a rental that I'm going to ask for Israel to pay my family to use for peace in the area. Where did I find this number? The first time they came to me, because I asked. That's how the amount Turkey received to rent the roof to fly and bomb Iraq. If the roof, this is a war, Golan also still. So this is numbers. If the roof of Turkey, the value is 21 billion for 1 month, a year, just to bomb Iraq, how much is Golan that they're occupying for peace and security for more than 50 years? Right?
Well, I think then we can end on this numbers note, because there's actually a lot more within the economics section around what comprises the 14 trillion number that we got. But think of the 14 trillion economic impact of peace as almost the opportunity cost there. It includes losses. It includes what we could have. So I encourage you to use some of those numbers in your own advocacy efforts. You know, it's clear here that people are engaged either at the academic level or at the practitioner and lobbying level. But the UN Global Compact, for those working with private sector, is really trying to think about some of these different areas that have traditionally been somewhat untouched by the private sector, and they also need help there. So if you have an organization or an NGO that knows ways that private sector can be more meaningfully involved in a peace-building agenda, then definitely share that information with them, because they also need ideas and inspiration and connections. And if you have an interest in working with some of the data for your own research, then we're very happy to provide the data sets for you. There's a lot of information in this index. Obviously, I didn't go into all of it, nor into all of the different country dynamics, but I also encourage you to do that yourself. You can make your own country profile. So thank you guys all for joining us. Eat this food, please.
The fridge, it doesn't go in the fridge. So please eat it.
And look forward to some of our next publications. And thanks again to Global Compact for hosting us.